So Ukraine just attacked into Russia again. Belgorod this time, not Kursk, and it does look quite a bit smaller than the Kursk invasion of a few months ago. But this kicked off 3 days ago, and by all accounts, it's still very much ongoing. In fact, a lot of Russian mill bloggers are saying, quote, "The situation remains difficult." Now, anytime something comes out like this, we inevitably hear that it is purely Ukrainian propaganda. So I thought, hey, let's just use Russian sources. What are the Russians telling their own population? So starting with that, we've got a couple different mill bloggers we're going to run through here. Wargonzo says, quote, "The situation in the Krasnoyarsk district of Belgorod has remained extremely tense in the last few days." I definitely butchered that word, by the way. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to supply personnel to the demined area near the village of Debedovka. Now, I want to give you an idea of where we're talking about on the map. We are going to talk a little bit about Kursk here in a minute, but starting with Belgorod. So we've got Suryak map here. This one I found better when the lines are changing quickly. So looking for developments in this map in the last 24 to 48 hours. They're still not there, but I feel like this is going to be more reliable at this point. So this is the Kursk pocket up here. We'll talk more to that here briefly. But the area that we're seeing Ukrainian forces move into is right in here. So you'll see this town, Debedovka. It's going to come up quite a bit in today's video, as is Grafovka. Mostly because there's a bridge here that it looks like Ukrainian forces may have targeted to destroy this to help isolate this pocket a little further north. So it's nothing major. This isn't a long, deep push into Russian territory, but it is, again, Ukrainian forces moving into Russia, taking the fight onto Russian land. So again, this pocket here is primarily where the fighting is taking place today. Now, shifting back over to Wargonzo, he says, "Despite the serious fire impact from our troops, the Ukrainian armed forces are persistently repeating their attempts to transfer personnel who must prepare a bridgehead for further development of the offensive, after which the Ukrainians will most likely conduct another attack using light and heavy armored vehicles." And this is something that we've heard mixed at this point. There's some Russian mill bloggers saying there's no vehicles involved. Others say that all of the Ukrainian vehicles have been destroyed. And others still are saying that it's kind of a phased attack. They're using vehicles to kind of move the troops up towards the point of contact, dismounting the infantry to push forward, and then the vehicles that are still able to return to the rear, maybe to pick up more soldiers. Wargonzo says the enemy's plan is not entirely clear. It's obvious that despite any advances, the Ukrainian armed forces will be driven out of the Belgorod region and will suffer serious losses. Most likely, in addition to the media component, the operation near our border is intended to draw off some Russian troops from other directions, stretching them along the line of contact. He adds the Russian armed forces are taking similar actions, attacking the Ukrainian positions on the Zaporozhye front. So that is a big question here, is why exactly is Ukraine carrying this out? My understanding at this point is we are seeing some units pulled directly out of that Kursk pocket and essentially redeployed a little bit south directly into Belgorod. They say it is possible that holding a small territory in the Kursk region, Kyiv plans to add a piece of Belgorod to it, which in terms of media will look very significant, and despite the minimal area of territory controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces. At the moment, reports from the localities are that the situation is far from critical. Despite the activity of the Ukrainian armed forces, the territories of the border settlements remain under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. Now, going back to the map here to give you one idea of what Ukraine might be trying to do in this situation, we just talked yesterday about the possibility of Russia closing out this Kursk pocket here, this red area. Having trouble with the map. So this red area here is where Russian forces have really pushed the Ukrainians back to a relatively small bridgehead in Kursk, and there's increasing talk that they might continue moving into the Sumy region and the massing of Russian forces along that border region. So it is possible that what Ukraine is doing by pushing into Russian territory here is trying to slow, maybe divert some of those Russian forces that could be used in an offensive manner in Sumy, pull them over here, having to defend Russian territory in Belgorod. Now, a couple other mill bloggers here do get a little deeper into the tactics actually playing out in this battle that we're seeing right now. But first, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Brooklyn Bedding. All right, so today we're taking a little field trip to the living room. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard about Brooklyn Bedding. They're a mattress company that's been in the industry for over 25 years and are known for their high-quality products that come without the shocking price tag. Anyways, thanks to Brooklyn Bedding, ours just arrived, so let me grab my assistant. We'll unpack it and see what this setup looks like. All right, so we're here in the living room. I got my handy sidekick, Etta, and we're going to unpack this bed, so let's see what it looks like. You ready?
Yeah.
Start pulling that side. All right, so when searching for a new mattress, personally, I wanted something that, of course, is going to be comfortable, but also easy to move and get into the house. Like, I have driven around town with a mattress hanging out the back of the truck before. It's doable, not always the most fun. But then I also wanted to try something that was cooling. I tend to sleep a little hot, so thought that might be a good move. And based on all this, I got the Sedona Elite. That's what you see here. This has a universal medium feel, so not too hard, not too soft. And it actually comes with a Glaciotex Plus cooling cover, which, again, I think is going to be perfect. Now, Brooklyn Bedding delivers direct to your door for free within the United States. And as you can see here, it just comes rolled up in this box and is pretty easy to set up. I mean, if I can pull this off with my 6-year-old assistant, I think you probably can too. Now, of course, there's the very real concern that what happens if you buy a mattress and you end up not liking it because it just showed up in the mail. So to that, Brooklyn Bedding has a 120-day trial period. That means you can sleep on this thing for like 3-4 months and then make up your mind. Is this actually the right mattress for me or not? Look, this is just what my family needed. So if you're in the market for a new bed, be sure to check out brooklynbedding.com/Preston Stewart, and you can click on the link below and use code Preston Stewart for 30% off your next purchase. And again, thank you so much to Brooklyn Bedding for sponsoring today's video. Okay, first things first. Can you test it? Okay, good?
Yeah.
How many stars?
What?
1 star, 5 stars, 1,000,000 stars?
1,100,000 stars.
1,100,000 stars. We're at it. All right, then moving on to the next mill blogger here, or reporter, called Older Than Edda is their name. Different spelling than my Edda, the star of that commercial there. That's ETTA. This Russian mill blogger, EDDA. No relation. So they say the enemy does not abandon attempts to attack the Belgorod region. Over the past 2 days, there have been very intense battles here. There are a huge number of drones in the sky. The enemy artillery is showering our positions. As in previous attempts to attack, the enemy throws in large numbers of armored vehicles, which are quickly knocked out by our drone operators. Tanks, armored recovery vehicles, and Bradleys of the enemy are burning on the state border. The loss of a large number of vehicles has generally become a calling card of the Ukrainian armed forces. They jump in, dismount the infantry, lose the vehicles, and then the infantry is destroyed in the plantings by our artillery and drone operators. So a quick note here, a couple things that stood out to me. First off, the usage of Bradleys. They have expanded to other units for a long time. It was just the 47th Mechanized Brigade. There are 2, maybe 3 Ukrainian units now that are using Bradleys, but we haven't just seen them thrown willy-nilly into the front randomly. There tends to be a concerted effort wherever the Bradley fighting vehicles are used. And we have seen a few already in Belgorod that have been destroyed, which leads to the second interesting point here, which is that Russia appears much more prepared for a Ukrainian incursion, I think we should call it at this point, than they were in Kursk. We've seen Ukrainian forces push into Belgorod quite a few times since the war began, and it does seem right now like Russia had more resources available to them between drones, drone operators, artillery, and rotary wing helicopters. We'll see some footage from Russian helicopters targeting Ukrainian vehicles here shortly. A lot more of that was ready. And additionally, the Russian forces that were in Belgorod, kind of defending that territory, didn't run and hide. They actually stayed and fought. And a couple of the mill bloggers talk about that. But wrapping up here with Older Than Edda, they say, for its part, the enemy is trying to isolate the battlefield by attacking roads with drones. And we do have something on that as well here in a minute, talking about how Ukraine is trying to isolate especially the northern portion here and kind of cut off any Russian reinforcements from coming in. Shifting over to 2 majors, and every one of these mill bloggers, for what it's worth, these summaries from them will be linked in the description below if you want to read them in their entirety. 2 majors says, early in the morning, opposite the village of Demidovka, the enemy, numbering about 35 personnel, dismounted with the help of landing several armored vehicles. Both sides are actively using FPV drones, both from the enemy and from our side. The enemy infantry managed to advance beyond the Dragon's Teeth and approach the outskirts of the village. A rifle battle is underway. The enemy is not currently using equipment. Border guards, together with units of the Russian Ministry of Defense, remain on the lines entrusted to them, do not retreat from their position, and are fighting. So kind of mixed on that not using equipment, because in these videos here that we're sharing, there's very clearly Ukrainian equipment being utilized. So what I'm kind of taking away from that is, again, the equipment is being utilized to demine and breach the Russian lines, drop off infantry at the point of attack, and then move back. Again, maybe they're destroyed at that point, or they go back to pick up resupplies or additional manpower. And again, kind of stressing here from these Russian mill bloggers that the border guards, along with the actual Russian military forces, are not retreating. They're holding their ground and fighting. Two majors continued by saying it is important to note that Rybar reports that in an effort to isolate the combat zone, Ukrainian aviation disabled the bridge in Grafovka to the south in order to cut off communications. Ukrainian formations did not reach this town itself. Now I'm going to pull the map back up here to show you what we're talking about. Again, very small area, all things considered. A lot of attention, given that this is Ukraine moving into Russia. But the scope of the front here is relatively limited. So we're going to hear more here in a second about how the town of Demidovka is pretty much gone. There wasn't much there to begin with, but it sounds like it's been under pretty intense artillery fire just in recent days. Right down here, they're talking about a bridge in Grafovka. Probably mispronounced that was destroyed. It looks like it was probably this one here. So if this bridge is eliminated, you see it reduces the ability of Russian forces to move north. They're not going to be coming anywhere here further west, and they might have to shift further and further east to actually get to roads that they could utilize. So again, according to two majors, it looks like they're trying to isolate that portion of the battlefield. He says Demidovka itself has been reduced to ruins as a result of intense fighting. Local sources report they say the enemy is attempting to attack again this morning. That's something I want to stress here is we heard these initial reports 3 days ago, and it's kind of been spotty. Very little, I don't think anything, officially coming from Ukraine at this point. Some of the Ukrainian war bloggers that are on the ground there are updating the situation, but very little from Ukraine. The Russian information has been hit or miss. Of course, as expected in the opening hours of this attack, Russia said, good news, we repelled the attack, it's over, nothing to worry about. And here we are 3 days later. But the important piece here is that we're 3 days into this operation, and these very pro-Russian mill bloggers on Telegram are saying the attack is still happening. The fighting is ongoing today. Two majors continued by saying it is important to realize our troops have been fighting for 3 days, which means we must not forget about the delivery of ammunition, drones, and the rotation of personnel. The enemy has suffered significant casualties, but there are reports from the Ukrainian armed forces that they continue to build up its group in this direction, having transferred several combined units of mechanized brigades from mobilized Ukrainians and experienced units from other directions to the state border area. And the 3 days worth of fighting is something that we can't just write off entirely. So when you look at the entirety of the border shared between Russia and Ukraine, it's massive, and it comes up a lot in the peace talks. Who's going to patrol this massive border between the two countries to make sure they're not violating some sort of ceasefire? But we have to keep in mind that the entire area is not actively engaged in combat operations. So much of this front, there might be drone attacks here and there, maybe the occasional small arms fire, artillery or mortars, but it is not intense fighting. The intense fighting is kind of reduced to a couple of key areas along the front. Now, it doesn't mean it's safe. Like if I were a Ukrainian, I wouldn't just cross this border and start walking into Belgorod and vice versa. There are defensive positions there, but it's not certain that Russia necessarily has 3 days worth of combat provisions for their troops that are in this area, is what I'm getting at. That's going to be dispersed to other areas of the front that are seeing more intense, more immediate need, more intense fighting, and a more immediate need for that equipment. So two majors hitting on here. Got to make sure that as this fighting goes on, these guys are reinforced. The last mill blogger here I want to talk to is Archangel of Special Forces, again, pro-Russian account here. He says, during the night, Ukrainian formations, as expected, continued their attempts to cross the state border and break through to Demidovka. Reserves moved towards the border all night. Afterwards, the Ukrainian armed forces used mine-clearing units. As a result of our fire, those mine clearers were destroyed and another vehicle was hit. Now the enemy infantry are hiding in the plantings, or the wood lines, essentially, south of Demidovka. They are trying to throw as many people as there are possible into the attack. They are being destroyed. So, again, very much the fog of war right now. We're hearing nothing from Ukraine. Russia is kind of a mixed, from the attack is ongoing to they're all being destroyed, and then, of course, a couple days ago to the entire attack was repelled. Now, all of this does come amidst the ongoing, essentially, withdrawal from the Kursk pocket, which, to give you an idea of the location, we're talking about the very southern portion, essentially, of that Kursk pocket. We're just going to move up here a little bit to see I think I can get it all on the same map. So here's Demidovka, where the attacks are happening right now by Ukrainian forces. This is what remains of the Ukrainian pocket in Kursk right here. Essentially these two small areas. That has been significantly reduced in the last week to 10 days. However, it does look like this has been as effective a withdrawal as can occur. There are definitely Ukrainian losses in the Kursk pocket, no doubt. It looks much more organized in terms of pulling back than we've seen in other areas of the front, to include Avdiivka, Bakhmut, places in the south and the east. And again, we're seeing a lot of burned out Ukrainian equipment, a handful of Ukrainian soldiers being taken as prisoner, overrun positions, and a lot of course, dead Ukrainian soldiers as Russia advances. But it does look like a lot of those positions were able to retrograde into Ukraine and are probably being utilized now to push into the Belgorod region. Now, in line with all of this, we've got these pretty significant ground operations ongoing. But just last night, Ukraine actually carried out a significant drone attack against the Russian Engels Air Base. Now, Engels hosts the bomber regiments that have Tu-160 and Tu-95 aircraft that are regularly used in strikes against Ukraine. So we don't have an official battle damage assessment at this point. You'll see the videos and pictures here. Clearly something big went boom. For that big of an explosion, that big of a fire, it kind of leads me to believe that some sort of ammunition dump was probably hit. Maybe an area that distributes fuel to the plane, something like that. Something on the airfield clearly was hit, something that was flammable. The Russians at this point are saying that it was just a series of private and summer cottages that were destroyed. But they said, judging by the aftermath footage published by local channels, there is an evacuation taking place, and that it's likely that a strike hit an ammunition depot. Again, no actual pictures or videos to show battle damage assessment from that strike. We probably will get some satellite imagery in the next 24 to 48 hours to be able to dial that in. At the same time, last night, well, actually just before this Engels Air Base attack, Russia kicked off a pretty significant drone attack into Ukraine. Coming from Russian mill blogger Alexander Kotz, he says this is the flaming horizon. And look, I'm going to put the name of this Ukrainian city up on the screen. I've tried to pronounce this before recording like 6 times, and I'm nowhere. I can't even get the word out of my mouth hardly. So there you go, Ukrainian city. Actually, a good ways back from the front. Kotz says the city has a fairly large industrial zone used by the enemy for parking military equipment and setting up repair shops. He says overnight our UAVs struck the area and a train unloading zone. Then the report coming from the Ukrainian side here, United 24, says this town suffered its most massive Russian attack of the war overnight, with more than 20 drones striking the city, according to the head of the regional military administration. They say that 8 people were injured, including a child. The attack caused significant destruction to civilian infrastructure. Residential buildings in several areas were damaged, with broken windows, destroyed balconies, and structural damage. So a lot happening right now in Ukraine. We, of course, are waiting for the next round of ceasefire negotiations set to take place in Saudi Arabia, probably here in the next few days, with elements from Russia, elements from Ukraine, and elements from the United States. There is no official ceasefire between the two parties. Nothing has been agreed upon between Russia and Ukraine. It seems like that is probably going to be the focus when they get to Saudi Arabia. But in the meantime, we've got a continuation of Ukrainian ground operations into Belgorod, Russia pushing the Ukrainians out of Kursk and continuing to advance, or trying to advance, in areas of the south and eastern Ukraine. And then, of course, every single day now, we are seeing kind of an uptick in drone and missile attacks from Russia into Ukraine, and more long-range Ukrainian drone strikes with their domestically manufactured drones striking Russian targets pretty far from the front. But that's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.